All right, so this video is on shoulder rotation patterns in the backhand. This is not a tutorial, it's more just explaining things and showing all these variations to try to kind of get a bigger picture view of things. Refresher, what is internal and external shoulder rotation? If you put your arm by your side and I rotate it away from my body, that's external. If I rotate it towards my body, that's internal, towards my body. And then the forearm also does similar thing. That's just forearm, and it's in the external direction. That's called supination. In the internal direction, that's called pronation. You can also think about it as supinate your forearm to hold a bowl of soup, and then pronate is in the other way. So with the elbow bent and the elbow by the side, internal, forearm across the body, external, forearm goes away from the body. Internal, now elbow up, now we're in a power pocket position. And then if I hold the elbow height the same, external goes like this, hand goes above the elbow, and then internal like this. And we generally want the forearm to be level with the shoulders or angled down more because that's in the internal rotation direction. So this is not hand above elbow to me because the forearm is still level with the shoulders. It's the shoulders tilting here. Hand above elbow is. Now, as you can see, if I hold the elbow height the same, external rotation is raising the hand a lot and lowering the hand a lot for internal rotation. If I don't hold the elbow height the same, we often have a strong desire to what we're holding and manipulating to keep it in a certain spot. It's a common thing we need to do in manipulating things. So when the elbow's bent and I externally rotate, instead of having it raise up so high, my elbow wants to dip, so I keep it at the same height. And internal rotation, my elbow wants to come up to help me keep this at the same height. So the elbow dip is something that's naturally helpful in lots of situations. So that's why it's so hard to stop in the disc golf throw. And because of that, external rotation, elbow dip, I think the primary driver of elbow dip is shoulder rotation. And so the primary fix is stronger internal rotation, because you can't, if you're internally rotating, you can't be externally rotating at the same time. So if your internal rotation, focus, effort is stronger than your external rotation, then you will not have elbow dip. And I have a video on that I'll put in the description below. So you can also think about palm up is supination and palm down is pronation, but you have to be careful using these reference points up and down in relation to what? The ground. But you can have your arm rotation stay the same, but still have it look more up or down without the arm rotating. So for example, if I'm reaching back like this, which would be kind of throwing flat, slight hyzer maybe, looks like my palm is not up or down, but if I tilt into more hyzer posture reach back, my palm looks like it's more up, even though I didn't rotate my arm like from my arm, but my posture tilted it. And similarly, if I go towards the hit with like flat posture here, it looks like my palm's not up or down, but if I'm in more hyzer posture and you see you see it coming from here, it looks like the palm is more up versus here, and then here, as I get to the hit and follow through on more hyzer posture, it looks like the palm is more down compared to here, even though I'm not changing my arm rotation. So you can't really use it definitively. You have to use like other reference points internal to the posture, which makes it really difficult to see what's happening. And that's why I use proxies like the orientation of the disc, which direction is it moving. So a challenge when talking about this in particular, but also just form in general, is we're talking about both positions and movements. And oftentimes the same word is used for position and movement. And so it can be hard to follow exactly what someone's saying. I try to make the distinction, but I'm not perfect, so I'm not always going to be consistent. So for example, this here, I would say this is internal rotation, as in movement, If I stop now, I would say this is internally rotated, indicating position. However, there's more confusion because if I go like this and then I do internal rotation and I stop, this is now an externally rotated position. So I moved from external rotation using internal rotation, the movement, and arrived at still externally rotated because I did not cross neutral, which for me is here. If I just relax my arm, this is neutral. I didn't cross neutral, and I need to cross neutral to get into the position of internal rotation. So see what I just did right there, accidentally I said internal rotation when I was talking about position, so then I added the word position onto it because I didn't say internally rotated. So that's another way I try to make the distinction. Sometimes it just feels more natural in the moment to say the other, tense of the word, and then add on, the word position to make it clear. So talking about neutral position again, each person has slightly different neutral position, but if I just raise my arm without rotating my shoulder, and now I hold my arm here to make sure I don't rotate my shoulder, and I bend my elbow, this is where it ends up. So you can see I'm not internally rotated enough in this position for it to be considered a good pocket. But I'm not externally rotated position-wise. This is my neutral. However, in the context of disc golf, since this is not enough internal rotation, the position, we often will just say, that's externally rotated. Or might say it's, too much external rotation or something like that. So when I talk about shoulder rotation patterns, I may label something that's actually neutral and call it externally rotated because of that context. Because in reality, I should just say not enough internal rotation or do more internal rotation to get to the position we want. But, there's these kind of shorthands because most people know that this is not where you want to be. So that's another challenge and why it's so hard to get into a good power pocket position, because it's not just internal rotation. It's quite a bit of internal rotation required to get to the forearm being like level with the shoulders or a little bit even below level with extra internal rotation. So later in this video, I have examples of pros where I'm going to label their position or their movement in terms of shoulder rotation. And so I may label it externally rotated when it's really maybe just neutral or even small internal rotation because I'm guessing and it's hard to see exactly with all the stuff going on, camera angles and the posture changing. So just know that. What's more important is it's kind of trying to capture the shoulder rotation patterns, to capture like kind of general theme and feeling of certain parts of the throw. And that helps us group different pros kind of together. They're more similar than these other pros who are more similar to each other than they are between groups. So even though I made a big point about how the forearm rotation and the shoulder rotation want to go together, I make that point because with that knowledge you can leverage using or thinking about forearm rotation to get yourself to do the shoulder rotation you want to do, or vice versa. But there are of course exceptions. So for example, if I'm in a position like this and I'm relaxing my forearm, the weight just wants to hang down like this. So that's pronation of the forearm. But my shoulder is not internally rotated here, which goes along with pronation. But I'm not actually externally rotated. This is my neutral position. But I can externally rotate, and there's no desire in a position like this for me to supinate my forearm, even though that goes with external rotation. So this is kind of like an exception. So some people, they hold the disc like this when they start off, and then they lift their elbow while they're extending their elbow at the same time into the reach back. But if we use the disc as a proxy for shoulder rotation, which I often do because it's a quick and easy thing to see, this looks like some briefcase. So it makes it seem like maybe it's internally rotated, but it could be a bit of pronation in the forearm with that, some slight external rotation in the shoulder. Compare that to if I
supinate a little bit, and then internally rotate more, looks like a similar amount of briefcase, but different forearm and shoulder rotation. Sometimes I'm using the disc as a proxy, and it's of course an estimation. It's hard to know exactly the combination of forearm and shoulder rotation.
I think so many people are focused on trying to just perfectly keep the disc like this that they don't have feeling or focus of being really strong with the internal rotation. They're afraid to be really strong with it because they're just trying to keep it smooth and steady and balanced. And so if you don't have that extra strength in the internal rotation, then once the external rotation starts happening, your elbow's dipping and there's no saving it. But if you're already thinking about strongly internally rotating, then the elbow dip has no chance to come in. Trying to keep the disc flat like this sounds like it's the simplest thing that you should try to do, but it's actually the hardest thing. Keeping the disc perfectly flat like that requires perfect balance between internal and external rotation. Why are you chasing perfection if you're having so many challenges in your form already? I stopped trying to chase it. Even with a trajectory of improving quickly, it was a bad goal for me. I wasted my time chasing after it. It's so much easier to get closer to that goal by trying to overcorrect into the good direction, internal rotation. And if I fall a little bit short of that overcorrection exaggeration, what happens when I fall a little bit short is I actually end up sometimes looking like I'm keeping the disc flat. But it's only because I tried to overcorrect. And every time I successfully exaggerate like this in the internal rotation direction instead of the external rotation direction, and then I start thinking to myself, okay, I can back off on the exaggeration. I'm gonna try just a little bit of exaggeration. Well, what happens then? Uh-oh, I'm back to elbow dipping. Until I drill it in for years, it's not worth it to try to get that close to perfection. Now, also because of what I showed with forearm and the shoulder, they can rotate in the same direction when the arm is extended. So if I'm throwing towards the camera, you can see that this is external shoulder rotation, and now this is forearm supination going in the same direction, or internal shoulder rotation, and then forearm pronation, continuing in that same direction. When I talk about shoulder rotation, to me, I'm always implying in my head that if I'm talking about internal shoulder rotation, probably the forearm is wanting to do pronation. And if I'm talking about external shoulder rotation, it's implied that supination of the forearm is kind of coming with it. And when the arm's stretched out without the elbow being bent, it's very easy now to rotate the shoulder without the elbow height changing, because we don't have this issue of the forearm swinging up and down. So on the way out of the pocket, for example, as the elbow is extending and the arm is straightening, whether you're internally or externally rotating, it's not having as huge of an impact on the arm going up and down like it does when the elbow's bent. And you can see if I'm throwing towards the camera that external rotation and supination are going in the nose down direction, and internal rotation, pronation are going in the nose up direction. That's why this pour the coffee is not nose down, because we're not actually throwing with the arm pointing at the target. We're throwing standing sideways to the target with the arm pointing out to the side. So pour the coffee, not nose down. External rotation, supination, that is nose down. Pronation, internal rotation, is nose up. But even though I'm showing how the forearm and the shoulder rotation go together, when the elbow's bent, you can see that external rotation and internal rotation are doing this to the disc, but forearm rotation is doing this to the disc. So the disc is moving, changing its orientation in what looks like pretty different ways. It's still very tempting to do them together, and with other objects that are not shaped in that flat disc shape, even with the elbows bent, you can see that here I'm internally rotated and pronated. Supination of the forearm is tilting this bottle up like that, and then shoulder rotation is also doing it in that same direction. So together helps me flip it like that, and then back the other way, internal, external, with the elbow dipping to help me hold it in the same spot. You're doing both of them together usually. So again, very tempting. So this is where Briefcase comes in. Briefcase is pronation. And then what I say, anti-briefcase, this is kind of like in between when it's pointing at your chest, and then anti-briefcase is the other way. I could barely get it to anti-briefcase while my elbow's up. I have to drop my elbow to really get it into anti-briefcase. So it's contradictory, in my opinion, to try to hold the disc like this with the elbow up, because it's requiring you to rotate your forearm in the direction that it doesn't really want to go, because you're rotating your shoulder in the opposite direction. Internal rotation with supination. And this is why we see so many pros are on at least slight briefcase, because they have their elbow up, they have their shoulder internally rotated, and so their forearm wants to go in that direction that goes along with the internal rotation, which is pronation, which is briefcase. So you can use the disc orientation as kind of a proxy to kind of help you see what kind of shoulder rotation is going on usually, because of the forearm rotation making you want to shoulder rotate. So when I see it, if it starts on kind of, there's exceptions, of course, because look, this is pronation. I can dip my elbow into external rotation and still be in pronation. So there's some exceptions, of course. But when I see people with their elbow up like this, I see briefcase, and then if I see it come out of briefcase, they're externally rotating in the reach back, and then coming back to briefcase, they're internally rotating back out of briefcase, they're externally rotating. And this is what I normally think about when I'm playing with different shoulder rotation patterns. I'm kind of thinking about this orientation change of the disc to help me, my proprioception, my awareness of what my body's doing, feel the top of the disc go towards my chest, brings my elbow up because this is pronation, and that makes me want to internally rotate. Now you do have to be careful about looking at the disc orientation. It can be deceptive because of posture also having an impact. So here, if I tilt the top towards my chest a bit and I hold that in the same place, this is clearly briefcase. But now if I tilt my body like this, if I bend at the side and forward, this would be like more hyzer posture. It looks like the disc is no longer in briefcase if you're looking at the ground. I always look at it in relation to the chest, so you can still tell. So some people, their default, like Eagle, if he's throwing flat, he reaches back like this, a lot of briefcase. When he's throwing on hyzer, his body's tilted more like this. It looks like no briefcase, but it is like the shoulder, the forearm is still in the same position. It's the posture that makes it look different. All right, so in order to talk about the different patterns of shoulder rotation in the throw, I'm going to break the throw into 3 phases. You've got the reach back, pulling through into the pocket position, and then coming out of the pocket into the hit. So with those 3 phases, we can now talk about where the shoulder rotation implied. When I say shoulder rotation, is the forearm rotation as well. What is the shoulder doing? Which way is it moving? Or which position is it in if we freeze? Because if you are internally rotated in the pocket, that means you were either internally rotated in the reach back and you kept it internally rotated in the pocket, or you were externally rotated in the reach back and you turned it into internal rotation in the pocket. There's implications there, and now we can assign in those 3 positions a shoulder rotation there. So, for example, internal rotation, and then external rotation. So that would be IR, IR, ER. So also, because of what I said about shoulder rotation and nose angle, on the way out of the pocket, you need to be turning in the external rotation direction to get it nose down. Or even, I think, just to get it nose neutral, just to not throw nose up. You need to be moving in that external rotation direction. It's kind of like a given or a requirement when you're throwing hard and you don't want to throw nose up, that you need to be externally rotating out of the pocket and into the hit. And in order to externally rotate out of the pocket and into the hit, it helps to be in the other direction, internal rotation, so that you have the range of motion to be moving in the other direction, right? If I want to press over to the right here, I can't do it anymore because I've already done it. I don't have the range of motion. I need to come this way again so I can go back that way. So shoulder rotation is kind of similar. If I want to go this way, I want to start in the other way. So that's kind of like external rotation as the ending, rotation for that third position is kind of like a given. You just have to do it if you want to throw nose down. So that's why it's one of the most common patterns among people with good form who throw far. The other most common pattern is external rotation in the reach back, and then internal rotation, and then external rotation. So ER, IR, ER. ER, IR, ER. So the pocket, everyone knows, should be internally rotated because that allows you to throw along this elbow hinge, which helps you get power. So the pocket has to be that way. Out of pocket for nose angle and throwing far generally has to be external rotation. So 2 of these phases are already, you got to do it this way basically. So that really only leaves like the reach back kind of open for preference. Whereas the other 2, they can change for like utility situations, like when you actually want to throw nose up or you're trying to throw down. However, you might be thinking, well, some people can throw really far with their elbow dipped. Yes, they can, because you can still throw along your elbow hinge and get that long arm swing leverage with your elbow dipped, but you're just stuck throwing on a ton of hyzer unless you go throw with roller posture, so that with a dipped elbow you can still throw flat. If your elbow's dipped and you don't want to be stuck throwing hyzer, your only option is to now use external rotation for power, and your elbow kind of stays bent and you can't use the elbow hinge for power anymore. External rotation is also like your main swing plane here. So the external rotation, you can see it's not changing the nose angle anymore. But the forearm rotation, if I'm throwing this way, supination will still be nose down and pronation will still be nose up. So some of it still, is applicable there. There are 6 possible shoulder rotation patterns based on the 3 phases in the throw and 2 shoulder rotation options for each. But as I was discussing, because of the requirements for power and angle control, only 2 of them are really common at a high level. External rotation, internal rotation, external rotation. So ER, IR, ER, and then internal rotation, and external rotation. For utility situations, to throw nose up intentionally, it's common to do ER, IR, IR, or ER, ER, IR. Both of those will get you nose up. If they end in IR, they're nose up. If they end in ER, they can be nose down. I say that because there's some exceptions. All right, so first to start, I'm gonna do a couple throws where I'm not trying to do like too much changing. I'm just trying to keep it here, internal rotation pocket, and here, just trying to kind of keep it all level, but level within this internal rotation pocket. So to me, that's kind of like reach back is slightly ER, and then IR, and then just kind of neutral / slightly ER to keep it from being nose up. This is what I think a lot of people try to do because it's what they see happening in a lot of pros, and I think it's actually a bad goal. We're probably going to see I get some elbow dip because I don't have like the extra buffer of strongly trying to turn it more internally rotated. All right, so trying to keep it level. This is kind of like external, small internal, and then small external. I might be warming up as I go here, and to the extent that it looks like I'm actually keeping this level, it's because I'm throwing below my high speeds. As soon as I get higher speed, it becomes not good. Watch the top of the disc start turning towards the camera. That's the external rotation, elbow dip, anti-briefcase. That's already creeping in, and I'm not even throwing that hard yet. Talking about shoulder rotation in those 3 snapshots in the throw is of course a simplification. Everything in reality is much more fluid, so we can slice it many more times into many more sections and talk about it more granularly. But to create some simple patterns, that's why we're keeping it at 3. But here I'm gonna show how it's more fine-grained than that. So focus on the disc orientation as you see it going towards anti-briefcase, the top of the disc towards the camera, or briefcase, the bottom towards the camera. So reach back slightly internal, slightly internal, slightly internal, slightly internal. Now we start seeing it go towards external, more towards external, coming up here into some external elbow dip. Starting to see the top of the disc, external elbow dip, trying to stop the elbow dip, coming towards internal right here. Now coming out of the pocket towards internal, and then flipping to external, nose down here. All right, so that's what it looks like when I try to keep it perfectly level. That's when I think about trying to keep it perfectly level. I can make it look like that sometimes, but not by trying to do it directly. All right, next up, IR, IR, IR. This is going to be nose up because it's ending in IR and pronation. You know, they're going together. What I'm showing is an exaggeration here. As I come into the pocket, it may not stay all the way like this. It may come up a little bit like this. If we subdivided into more than 3 phases, it feels so bad. I just feel the fingers coming out like this because of the internal rotation and pronation. And of course, external rotation and supination are making the fingers dig in and help you grip better when done at the right time, close to the hit. I am exaggerating some of these nose up ones. This one was like 17 degrees nose up, whereas the last one was only 5. So with more exaggeration, I'm gonna feel more of this negative effect. And I also never practiced throwing hard with these nose up styles, so my speed is a lot lower. It shouldn't be this much lower, but probably would be slightly lower even with practice. I'm also not good at doing intentionally nose up and only slightly nose up because I'm used to exaggerating it. Oh shit. So here you can see the picture on the right, the blue line along the rim and the line perpendicular to that showing how the top of the disc is still somewhat facing my chest as I'm coming into the pocket. I'm fighting to continue turning it into briefcase just to stop the external rotation elbow dip towards anti-briefcase. And then you can see the picture on the left, how deeper into the pocket it's nearly flat now, losing that briefcase. And if I try to get it to that left position directly, I'm much more likely to just end up elbow dipping into anti-briefcase. I'm gonna do one more of these to try to get more briefcase, more IR into the pocket. I'm just thinking about turning it into briefcase even though I'm already reaching back on briefcase. All right, out of the 4, that last one looked most like I was trying to do. All right, now I'm going to do IR, ER, IR. It's going to be nose up since it's ending in IR. This one is one of the most, I don't know, awkward ones and like unusual. I wouldn't do it. If I wanted to throw nose up, I would do more ER in the reach back and then feel like I'm going from ER to IR the whole time. That feels much more natural for intentionally throwing nose up compared to this one. Like now go from IR to dip to then. So I might be the worst at this one. I don't know. Man. So the last one, I didn't actually get it nose up. It should have been, because this is really weird and awkward for me. I'm gonna have to maybe slow down on this, slow down on one of them. Yeah, so that slowed down one is more what I'm trying to do. The first one where I'm throwing faster, my muscle memory's overriding. When I'm throwing hard and I accidentally get some elbow dip, and then I get some like late internal rotation to try to get out of the elbow dip. And now that I have some internal rotation, now I can externally rotate to get it more nose down and get a, you know, good release. So it's like conflicting with that muscle memory where my body's trying to, all the work I've done to try to get to recover from elbow dipping is interfering with dynamically switching into elbow dipping from the reach back. All right, so now ER, ER, and keeping the ER. I never do this intentionally. Well, if I'm stuck with like a tree here and I don't want to swing it into the tree, I might take a really flippy disc and do this. So I can actually have room to swing with power. And I mean, if I want to throw like a hyzer, just a pure hyzer, then I don't need a flippy disc. But if I need to actually have it go straight or even go right, then I'll go to a super flippy disc. Also on this one, you can see if your arm is swinging like this, that rotating like this is not going to be aligned with that arm swing plane. So you now need to rotate like this, which is using side bend, bending at your side, which is what you normally do when you throw hyzer, to create the hyzer swing plane with the shoulder tilt. So you could see in that last one, my nose angle didn't get negative because I'm not able to use my external shoulder rotation for the nose angle since it's already externally rotated. I got that one nose down because I was thinking about it more and focusing more on the forearm. All right, so now ER, IR, ER. This is another one of the good ones. I gotta redo that. I was kind of too IR in the reach back. You could see the bottom of the disc slightly. I need to turn it more in the reach back. So it's kind of hard to tell from this point of view, but the reason we can see the disc below my forearm is because it's slightly on briefcase from forearm pronation. If my forearm was more supinated, the disc would get hidden behind my forearm until it becomes anti-briefcase above the forearm. Try to exaggerate it even a little bit more. Oh no, I forgot what I was doing. All right, so now ER, IR, IR. This is what I think of as the most typical classic nose-up swoop. Just for fun, another variation of ER, IR, ER, which is one of the good ones, but I was throwing with like kind of a normal version of that. But I can do ER, IR, ER with a big swoop, and even though I'm swooping, it's totally fine. I can throw nose down. It's still not ideal, but because you can swoop down and then internally rotate, and now you can swing back up, positive launch angle, and externally rotate nose down. So you can see in that last one, the disc is actually kind of down near my belly button, but I'm internally rotating and also lowering my elbow at the same time, which usually, as I said at the start, the elbow comes up with internal rotation. But here, since I'm reaching up and then I'm swinging my arm down with momentum, I can internally rotate. The elbow kind of like comes up and flares out, but the arm is kind of bringing it down at the same time. All right, I'm going to try to exaggerate it even more, including using some lower body differences. I'm gonna try to get, if I can remember, I'm gonna try to get really tall on my X step to help me swoop up, and then dropping down harder to help me swoop down and back up harder. Here are some pro examples in the shoulder rotation pattern I think they're using. These are estimates. It can be hard to tell, as I described, from the posture and also camera angle. If the reach back isn't clearly looking internally rotated, I just default to labeling it as externally rotated usually.
Thomas thought he slipped right off the bat.
No, straight card, but it's still a white card.
This is basically perfect internal rotation, elbow up, but without the disc on briefcase, which is insanely hard. Just pick up a disc and try to feel it. You'll feel the tension in your forearm. If Calvin's elbow was extended here, his forearm would continue along that white line, and it would look like a pretty normal externally rotated reach back.
As soon as the pull through starts, you can see the top of the disc start turning towards the chest slightly. And then on the left here, I was starting to debate, is his reach back really externally rotated or is it slightly internally rotated? The angle of the disc compared to the shoulder plane makes it look like it's not that externally rotated, but then when I draw a line through both sides of his elbow, it looks again like it's externally rotated a bit. So I think he just has some pronation in his forearm, and that's why the disc isn't tilted up along that blue line. So I'm keeping him in the ER category. This is Carter Ahrens, along with Luke Taylor. He's another one of these guys that's not really tall, but crushes over 80 miles per hour, and they both turn the disc into Briefcase during the pull through. I think he might have a similar thing going on to Anthony Barela, as I was just talking about, with the reach back being somewhat externally rotated with some pronation. Alright, this is Mikey from Overthrow. I've been talking to him occasionally about some of these ideas, and he tried some of them and shared some clips that I could use. He's a cool guy, always down to discuss ideas, and of course he's got a good eye for coaching, so if you like the content from Overthrow, then go check out their coaching offerings. So he's the best example that I know of the ER pattern and the variation of it that you can throw hard with. Because he's hit like, I don't know, 84 miles per hour on the tech disc, which only a handful of people in the world have done. So he's got super elite speeds. Even though he's got those elite speeds, he's working to change away from this ER pattern because of the various drawbacks I've mentioned already. And those drawbacks are probably why there's not many pros who throw hard that use this pattern. I'm sure a decent amount of pros went through a phase in their form where they did use this pattern, but then, you know, most of them have been playing for so long, so they've been able to, you know, over the years, their form has developed away from this pattern so that they can keep the power but have better angle control. So you can see here the disc is on a good bit of Briefcase, and in that throw he's trying to reach back on Briefcase to be more internally rotated to try to change the external rotation pull through. But as soon as the pull through is starting or about to start, you can see the disc is flipping the other way back to the normal throwing pattern, external rotation, anti-Briefcase. Super common issue with reaching back on internal rotation to try to fix your external rotation pull through. Even for us coaches, when we go to throw hard, we're going to revert back to our habits just like everybody else, unless you've done a huge amount of drilling at lower to medium to slightly higher, you know, until you can get your new form all the way up to max power. And this is why I'm so focused on the cue and the mechanics of turning the disc into Briefcase during the pull through. It's not that hard to reach back on Briefcase or reach back more internally rotated, because the huge acceleration of the throw hasn't even started yet, so there's not even that big of a challenge. And so it gives you like a false sense of security thinking you're improving your internal rotation when a lot of the time you're just going to go straight back to the external rotation elbow dip during the pull through, unless you do something, you know, stronger during the pull through
to internally rotate. So I asked Mikey if he's ever tried trying to powerfully turn it into briefcase during the pull through, and he said not really, so he gave it a try. I said to not worry about the reach back even though it wants to turn into anti-briefcase, because you can still do this cue, turning it towards briefcase during the pull through from that position. So from trying this cue, he said it was one of his best looking pockets that he's gotten before. But of course he did power down 66 miles per hour, you know, for him is not super fast, so it's easier to get better looking form. But I think it's super interesting. And I think this cue is very underrated. And I'm gonna make a video more focused on it and how to train to take advantage of briefcase and make it feel more natural. I'm not sure if Mikey's gonna stick with this cue for his own personal form work, but I thought he was a really interesting candidate to try it, since his shoulder rotation pattern is kind of the opposite habit, so it's like a very big challenge for the cue. Now I want to be clear here, this is a couple coaches experimenting with things, and this video is a nerdy, deeper dive into mechanics. It's not a polished coaching, you know, lesson video. And this is not Overthrow endorsing this cue to their students. It may or may not fit into their coaching methodology now or in the future. So if you're a current student of theirs, make sure you follow the lesson plan they give you.